Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, October 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Penn State game is in 2 days, the game against Michigan in 30 days. Way back in mid-September, every time I had Buckeye Scoops X's and O's guru Ross Fulton on the show, it was generally a fairly grim affair. Lots of talk about how the defenses they were running made no sense, how guys looked lost, why the offense seemed to go in and out of sync. Friends, I think you may enjoy this week's episode at least a little more than some of those earlier ones. Ross joins me again. Ross, before we get too deep into the technical questions, I'm going to start with this. Holy crap, can you believe this offense?
They're pretty impressive. And, and it's just also the way they do it. They push you in the run game, then they push you on the edges, and then eventually you're going to get beat vertically because they probably push the ball downfield definitely more than you see in college football today. And so the ability to create explosive plays is, I don't think it's really matched by anyone else in the country.
On Tuesday, Tony Gerdeman asked Ryan Day about that. And are they challenging, are they asking CJ Stroud to do more than they did with like Dwayne Haskins or Justin Fields at this point in their careers? And, he said, I don't know if it's more, it might be a little different, but I mean, to you, are they asking him to do more than they did for those guys at sort of a comparable point in their careers?
Yes, I would say yes in two ways. So with regards to Haskins, they definitely ask him to push the football downfield more, which maybe that's just different and not less complicated. I just think that the passing game is a bit more combines sort of what Fields did in terms of, much more vertical, four verts, deep crossing routes with some of what Haskins did. I think Justin Fields, in 2019, they could rely much more not consistently because Travion Henderson is really good, but they did rely much more on the run game. And then they had a excellent defense. So, I think that CJ Stroud is playing really well. I mean, I always thought it was overblown even at the beginning of the season when he had a bad shoulder. But I personally really appreciate how he sees the field and gets the ball out of his hands. I mean, that was probably always my critique of Justin Fields. Justin Fields, it's hard to fault him too much because he has the athletic ability to make plays out of structure. And so you took the good with the bad, but when people talk about Indiana blitzing or teams blitzing, it's like, well, it only matters so much because the offensive line is better pass protection this year. And so they pick that stuff up all the time. But B, if you blitz and you don't get there because he's getting the ball out, then it only matters so much. And you've left yourself with less guys in coverage against the Ohio State wide receivers.
The offense didn't look like this the first few weeks of the season. And I mean, you mentioned Stroud's shoulder, and I suspect that's at least part of the answer. But how, is there some other element to this as far as how this has come together to this degree, this relatively quickly?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. So obviously Travion Henderson also wasn't the starting running back the first couple of weeks, which makes a big difference. I still think Mayan Williams is good and has is a great second back, but obviously Henderson's explosiveness changed things. They did rework is probably too strong of a word. They emphasized different things in the run game following Oregon, where, we talked about after that game, how they were getting outnumbered at times at the point of attack without the quarterback zone read threat. And so, they're using more pistol. Saw that again on Saturday, a lot of pistol. They've diversified the run game more. Counter Trey has become a big part of it. Duo has become a big part of it. It's made it harder for defenses to slant to create negative run plays, which puts them behind schedule. And then I think Stroud, just beyond obviously his comfort, I do think his shoulder was a part of that. He's more comfortable throwing to the middle of the field now than I think he was early in the season. I mean, they're, just a little bit less telegraphing things, a little bit more comfortable going through his progressions. And so, and then the last thing is the offensive line. For all the experience those guys had, they moved people to new positions. So again, you got to work the more you work in tandem and handling, their issues this year have largely come from identifying things in the run game. And so the more you play, the more things you see, the more comfortable you get working together. So all those things came together. And then when your defense isn't like a sieve giving up like 8 yards a carry, a pop, and so you're like, the defense is on the field all the time, you're stuck with poor field position, you have to keep the pedal to the metal, that takes some pressure off of them and makes a big difference too.
Well, you wrote this week about some of the things you saw during the Indiana game, and that's always kind of interesting, just how teams are trying to attack this Ohio State defense or Ohio State offense. Indiana ran what's called a tight front to try and contain the Ohio State run game. So can you explain what a tight front is, what it's supposed to do, and then why that didn't really work against Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, the tight front has become more and more popular probably over the last 5 years in college football. Georgia runs a variation of it. You see it a lot. So you're basically putting 3 defensive linemen inside of the tackles. And by doing that, so you have like a nose guard head up over the center, and then you have 2 defensive tackle end types, and basically, inside of the guard and between the guard and tackle, what's called a 4-eye. But it essentially eliminates, like Urban Meyer, to go back to like the older spread offenses, loved running that inside zone, and he wanted to run it at like the bubble between, if there was what's called the open B gap, so the gap between the guard and the tackle, and so the tight front takes that away. So there's the A and both B gaps are covered up by defensive end linemen. So particularly if you're running from the shotgun with an offset halfback, it's harder to get essentially what I would call off tackle, or to the C gap, the next gap over between with the tackle and theoretically where a tight end would be. But, that's why you saw Ohio State's response to that was they just got in pistol and ran wide zone a bunch and counter tray a bunch and just got outside of those 3 guys. And then there's a big bubble between basically where those defensive linemen end, and then sort of that, what we've talked about, the overhang, out the guy who's sort of between the tackle and the slot receiver or tight end. And so it just creates a natural bubble. And, Travion Henderson he likes to bounce it. When he bounces it, good things happen. And so you want to put him in a position where he has that opportunity on the edge anyways.
Well, and in the passing game, you wrote about Indiana running a lot of cover 4. So, cover 4, is that kind of like a just don't give up the big play kind of defense? And if so, why was Ohio State still able to put together big plays against it?
Yeah. And so I've talked about this in my articles. You and I have talked about this. So cover 4 can be a lot of different things depending on how you run it. It can be aggressive. Ohio State runs it in a much more aggressive way. Depending how it just depends how much do you want to put your corners on an island in it, and how aggressive you want your safeties to come down against the run. And Indiana's answers to both of those questions were, we don't want our corners to be aggressive, and we want to keep our safeties back. And so essentially what they were doing a lot of times, they were asking their safeties, not only were they playing their corners soft, but they're asking their safeties to effectively help bracket or double team Olave and Wilson on the outside. And to do that, though, they had to then have their, nickel defender, slot guy. Basically, if, let's say Ohio State has 2 receivers to one side, and it's Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Njigba in the slot, and they both go vertical. Well, the corner has to take Wilson deep. Then the guy over in Njigba also is taking him deep so that the safety could help on Wilson. And so then you obviously have no one left really in the flats other than those linebackers who have to worry about the run. And so that's why, Jeremy Rucker, they had those easy completions to the tight end in the flat, and also why they had, multiple opportunities down the field to both Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jeremy Rucker, because they were just so worried about the 2 outside receivers that they created poor matchups for Indiana.
And on the other side of the ball, where things, we talked earlier about the offense has gotten better, like the defense has gotten way better. We're having way different conversations about the defense now than we were about a month and a half ago. But there was a little bit of a flashback there at the beginning of the game. Indiana's opening drive was 15 plays, 75 yards or something like that, touchdown. It was like, oh, we've seen this before, but we haven't seen this for a while. Earlier in the week, Ryan Day basically said that was just a function of teams coming up with stuff specifically aimed at stressing the defense on that opening drive, and then it's just a matter of how you adjust. But you wrote that on that drive, the defense was doing some of the same stuff that got them in trouble earlier in the year. So can you explain what they were doing and why you think they might have been doing it?
Yeah, I think it's more that than the scheming up. I mean, the scheming up only works if you know what you're going to get. And it's interesting. And this goes to my answer why I think they were doing it. But to start with, they were basically back to largely pre-rotating the safeties again, before the snap, the free safety is already in the middle of the field, and the boundary safety or Ronnie Hickman's already up in the box or over the tight end. And so again, when you see that, if you're an offense, well, there's only two types of coverages they can run from this: cover one and cover three. And so you did see them scheme some stuff against those but again, if you're being more multiple, then it's harder to run it. So I pointed out in my article, they had the 1 3rd down conversion. They threw the slant. They lined their tight end Hendershot out wide. So he singled up on Hickman, and then they kind of, ran a rub route to get him open because they knew they were going to cover one, and they did get cover one. Or, our old friend, the RPO glance route against cover three, came back for another big completion. So, maybe I'm giving them too much credit in saying that I think they want teams to continue going forward. They want the Penn States and Michigans of the world to think that we still should scheme to face the single high defense. I'm using air quotes, but the single high defense, and then so that they keep their teams then off balance by, hey, no, in fact, we are now running cover four as much as we run cover three. But and maybe they thought Indiana's just not good enough on defense that we can get away with it. But like a 75-yard drive later, they quickly changed gears on that, because then you saw them come out the next series, and they from then on, they went back to what they've been doing the past couple of weeks, which is playing a lot of cover four man. So the corners are manned up, so the boundary safety can play more aggressively, mixed with bring the cover safety on a blitz and roll to cover three behind it, and those kind of mixing the cover four with the cover three, and pretty sparing in playing cover one, and also again, having the two safeties split, regardless of whether they're in cover four or cover three, like the two safeties line up deep so that the offense doesn't know exactly what they're getting, and the defense can easily go between the two concepts.
I think this is worth prefacing with the fact that this defense unquestionably looks better than it did earlier in the year. I don't think anyone's going to argue that, but there are still some questions on the back end with, specifically with those safeties. I mean, so where do you see things that they needed to improve in those safety spots? And, is there a different lineup you'd like to see? Or, I mean, how would you try and address the issues they're having back there?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a tough one. And this is a little bit of reflection of, obviously if Josh Proctor was there, that this would handle some of the issues, but he's obviously not. And then you've changed what you're doing. So it's changed the rules somewhat. We've talked about this. So Ronnie Hickman's great at where he is, boundary covers for safety coming down to play the run. That's probably part of why they went to what they're doing, and don't mess with that. But then it's interesting because, as I talked about in my article, so for the past few weeks, they've had Bryson Shaw and Latham Ransom rotating at that field safety spot. He's in cover four, he's in the wide field. They have what would be called a 3-over-2, right? So they have the free safety, the cover safety over the slot, and then the corner over the outside receiver. And, he's that by doing that, it protects that position a lot more than when they're in a, single high. But, I think it still leaves something to be wanted in terms of the performance. But then again, they obviously decided that Ranson was not playing there better there than Shaw was, or they needed him at cover safety, because again, as we talked about, now in cover four, that cover safety has more run responsibilities than he did in cover three. So after the first series, they put him in for Marcus Williamson, and Williamson came back in the game later, but Ransom graded out a champion, and I think he does have a little bit bigger body there. And so, then at the very end of the game, they had Cam Martinez at cover safety. Now he comes in at free safety, so maybe they're trying him there. They could try Williamson there because he's played there. It seems like they have a bunch of guys at this cover safety spot who have played well, but they don't necessarily fit the spot anymore. So it seems natural that maybe they try one of them at field safety. But again, I think they have to take the spot away from Shaw, who at least is proficient in executing assignments. He just may not bring the ability to the table to like execute it up high end as some of the other positions do.
And the last thing I wanted to ask you about was linebackers, where, that was an area that a lot of people pointed at as a potential concern coming out of that Indiana game. So how would you grade the performance there from the linebackers, as well as the overall direction of that position group right now? And, is there a change that you'd like to see them make there?
So again, I think they've improved. It's better than it was. And part of that is they're not being as put in as bad of positions schematically as they were before. But, Steel Chambers just has to play. Like he is their best option at will linebacker. There's obviously, the other guy there, Taraja Mitchell, is a senior. He's a captain. So, that's obviously a situation that they're probably trying to manage. But, Chambers takes more and more reps away. And I think that's inevitable. I still give Cody Simon the benefit of the doubt. I know they like him a lot. He's been hurt. He keeps getting banged up. So, I think that he's probably still the guy there. I think Eichenberg's played a lot better. But, I think that with Chambers, they just have a much more of a playmaker out there than they do otherwise without him. And so, I think the more snaps he gets, the better off the overall defense is.
Well, you can find Ross's article from this week and at BuckeyeScoop.com. He has also been fairly active on our Ask the Insiders board this week, as have a whole bunch of our other guys. A lot of our recruiting guys have been very busy this week. Alex Gleitman and Bill Green and Mark Givler and Mick Walker. This is a big recruiting weekend. They've been very active on our Ask the Insiders board, tracking who's going to be coming to town, all that fun stuff. Mark and Bill, I've plugged this a couple times this week, but it was one of my favorite episodes. Gives in the Bank was fantastic this week. They talked about kind of like a long recruiting update. Really good episode. That is worth checking out on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. Just search Gives in the Bank to find that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. That will get you notified every time we post a new video. So when we post a new podcast like this one, or we do a live pregame show, live postgame show, interviews with players and coaches, it's all free. It's all at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. All you have to do is subscribe. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.